Hey guys, this is just a quick video to kind of get back into things as it's been a while since I've done anything like this. I just wanted to talk about the project that I am actually working on that I haven't done anything for uh, sort of guide or tutorial-esque wise yet because it took me a very long time to figure it all out. But I thought I'd show you what I've got at the moment, and then hopefully do some more videos of the same nature that I've done in the past, trying to develop another game, because the colony sim that I started on a while back, I kind of lost interest, and I'd lost interest in game development in general for a while. So essentially I decided maybe half a year or something ago to remake my old RPG. So I've got all the same concepts and I'm going to try and develop it to the same state that I left it before. So this was a game where you have a party of either yourself or up to 3 other not players but characters, and you had the character you made yourself, but you could also manually control the other characters, and anything that you're not controlling is AI controlled. Just very similar to same premises Dungeon Siege 2, if anyone's played that. So you'd make a character, you have, weapons, armor, various consumables, abilities, talent trees, quests, all that sort of stuff. And you go along and you would get into fights of various types of enemies, and you'd encounter new characters, and you would kind of you'd gear up these other characters, level them up. They were identical to you, so they just had some like starting equipment based on the environment you meet them in. So like if you met an NPC halfway through the game, they would have gear of that appropriate level, and then they would also have enough like attributes and skill points and stuff to for that level, and then you could like reset them and make them whatever you want. But the idea for me is the same premise. So you start out as yourself, fighting in small skirmishes against AI, and then maybe you encounter a few NPCs through like main quests and side quests, or maybe even like hidden areas and stuff, and then they get added to your party, and you just simply click on party member at the side, and then you could take control of them, and then your character would suddenly be taken control of by an AI and just function as if nothing had happened. So that's the idea. And so far, something that I'd been trying to get working for a very long time, and I only recently found out that it wasn't possible the way I was trying to do it, was I wanted to make the whole game based on data-driven sort of structures and stuff. So you would have everything in the game. So in the code, the actual C++ would be really base generic classes. They would almost do nothing, and there might be like a lot of them, but they would do very minimalistic stuff with the intention of working with the data that you've produced for it. So as an example, I've got my lovely tables here. So we've got, if anyone's done any relational databases before, it's going to be identical concept to that. So we'll have, do I have the, it's here. So we've got a load of structs which represent the data. So you can see we've got one which is item data with the ID of the item, the name, the type, the stack size. And then you've got a weapon which then relates to an item. So you've got the idea of a primary key, foreign key. So the item ID here would relate to an existing item ID here. And then the same thing goes to like melee weapon has a weapon ID, projectile weapon has a ranged weapon ID, because there is also ranged weapons. And the idea with all of this is to abstract data into the lowest level in the structure, so that the things that need to know about that information have access to it, and so that you don't have like accuracy on melee weapons, for instance. So this could potentially have been in the base weapon data, but in my game melee weapons just hit, you just have to be close enough. And so with that in mind, the accuracy only relates to ranged weapon data. And I think if I just quickly have a look, this one, this, I went and I can't remember how far I got, but we've got an access database. This is how a good way of visualizing data. So you can see exactly like I was saying before, you have item data, weapon data, and every weapon has an item ID, every ranged weapon has a weapon ID, and then you've got laser weapons, which have, again, a further extension to ranged weapons. I've changed it a lot, I've added a lot since this, but this was just an initial startup to figure out where the data exists. And so the whole project is going to be driven by these the database as much as I can, because it means the classes that I create are very simple, very reusable, and if I wanted to add new content to the game, rather than adding new classes, it would be more likely that I just add extra rows of information in the tables. Now, many of you might be, well, some of you might be thinking I'm going to be using the built-in U data tables for this, which is the if you go into miscellaneous, you can get stop clicking around. You can go to this, go data table, and then you can pick the structs, and it creates essentially a CSV file type thing where it's, you know, every attribute defined in the structure is a column in the table. But I decided to not use this because it doesn't work very well with the way that I'm trying to get it to work. So for instance, when you have data in a data table, the ID, which it calls name, you don't have access to once you've pulled that data across, which makes it very hard to find things with that ID. So for instance, if I had a weapon ID and I pulled out a list, sort of an array of all of my weapons, I wouldn't have access to this ID field here. And so when I try to create a weapon, I get the weapon data, then I get the weapon type, and I'm like, oh, it's a ranged weapon. So now I need to try and figure out what ranged weapon relates to this weapon data, but I don't know what this weapon data is because the ID doesn't exist. So that was a problem I fell into. So instead, I'm using just raw CSV files, which are very simply just as you would imagine. Just they don't have the first row doesn't have the headings for what each column represents, but I'll get onto that in a bit. But essentially, as you can see, I've got a list of items defined with, this is the ID of the item. So if I was to say go into the weapon data, it doesn't like opening them separately, or is it? Okay, there we go. Excel's a bit weird these days, right? So as you can see, so this would be the weapon ID and this is the item ID. So you can see here that we've got a weapon called damaging laser weapon, and that's because all items have names. So the name exists in this item data, and then the data for the weapon data for this item is this one. This is 0, and this is row 0. Well, sorry, index 0 in here. So then it's a type of laser weapon. I think that's its range, its damage, its fire rate, whether it heals or not. So you can see I've got a healing laser weapon here, which has whether or not it heals, say with different stats and everything. So that's the premise of the whole project. So everything in this entire project is using these CSV tables as much as I can. And it means that when I create weapons and items and quests and all of that kind of stuff, once I've done it once, got it all working with the table structures and stuff, I never need to like load it again, and I don't need to know whether I can access the data from the right place or not, because it's all just bare minimum structs of integers, strings, and floats. Pretty much the entire game, on booleans as well, but essentially the entire game is just going to be very primitive type data. So to give you a quick example of me actually using this stuff, so this is a weapon creator, which is just a class purely to pull out the data for weapons. So what it does is you give it an ID of the item. It then gets the item data. So we go to our game instance, which initially loads all of the data. We get our item data table, which is defined. Which is a custom class I made. So I've made my own CSV table object, which has a set of basic useful functions and sort of helper stuff, but mostly. And so we've got one of these, so we'll go over to the item data table. So this, all it does is it will have its own, let me just do that, there we go. So it's got an array of item data which gets populated by the game instance. So you load the game, when the game loads, it runs this load table data method, which I think, oh god, it's been a while since I looked at it. Here we go, on initialize in here. It then goes, get me every single, get me all the data for all of my tables. So it then goes in and it will ask, say, the item table to load its data. So then we come into here, come into, sorry, give me a second. We come into here, and then we basically get the file path, which relates to one of these. And then we use some, quite conveniently, we've got a lot of useful CSV. Well, we can quite easily parse CSVs using this. So what this does is it splits by line, terminators, and delimiters. So CSV files are typically actually comma separated values. So it will be a literal like something like this. So that, and then you split it by that, and then obviously each each part of the line, sorry, each row in the CSV is then split by these properties here. So we then end up with an array of strings, and at this point we're iterating over each row. So CSV lines is an array of rows of strings, so it will come out. In fact, yeah, I can just I probably didn't need to stop it. God, what happened to my mouse? Give me a sec. Fortunately, I got a new computer, so this does things very quickly now. This is basically the crux of the entire game, so this is the most important bit to make work well, and so far it's been great. So if we do this, so we've come into here and we're loading apparently the weapon data table. Hang on, I know what's happened. Give me a sec. You can't have the CSV files open for it to load them properly. Let me... Right, now it should be the item table. Yeah, cool. Right. So the file content, so it's gone and found, we've used file helper, and we pass in the path of, you can see all the usual projects, blah, source, blah, which is this. And then we have the file content, which is the output from that. And then we pass it into an array. So this array, it's now, as you can see, every single row in here, well, yeah, every object in here is a new a row in the table. And then in here, we pass it separately again. So we come out here. And then we get this temp array, which then splits it. So now each of these is a separate value. And then I have this clean data thing, which I think, because the data, you can see, actually has these quotes around each of them, which made it very challenging to work with. So I just clean out, basically get rid of all of the quotation marks and stuff. And then we add it to the list, so we iterate over. So this is creating essentially an array of arrays. So you can see if we go into the item data table bit here, we then come into here and we get given this array of arrays of strings. So then each of the first part array is a row, and then the array in that is each column of data. So you can see, 0 damaging laser weapon, blah blah blah. Each of those is a column, and then we just convert from string to the relevant stuff. So the item data has an ID, a name, a type, a max stack, and so we just get the index, the string, and this is specific. So if we ever change the structure of the data, we need to update this part of it as well. So then this will be like the so this is going to be like 0, this is going to be damaging laser weapon, then weapon, then I think I'm not sure what that one relates to. Is that the name? I can't remember now. That relates to something else anyway. And then we have 1, which is the stack type. And each of these are just doing very basic things. So this is using built-in Unreal Engine stuff. It's just f string, a toy, which converts a string into an integer. It's simple as that, and the same for a float. And that's how the entire thing works. Basically, I've got my own thing for getting the types. So this is converting strings nicely into enumerated values. So we get weapon, consumable, armor, all that kind of stuff. And then it just, like I say, it just goes through all of the tables systematically, picking out all of the values, and then we inevitably end up in here. This is something I just did as a proof of concept, but I made this combined weapon data struct. So this is a bit hacky, I suppose, but it's a container for all of the structures of data that it finds that relate to each other based on these links. So when we load the weapons, we get set the item ID, we then get the weapon data for that ID, we then check whether it's a projectile type, we then get the ranged weapon data based on the weapon ID, we then get the projectile weapon data based on the ranged weapon ID, and you can see essentially it creates this really nice list of all of the weapons and all of their relating data in one simple struct. So the ones that we're not using in here, for instance, we've got a laser weapon, so the melee weapon data and projectile weapon data are technically just blank structs with the minimum values. This isn't optimized or anything. This was just a proof of concept to make it easy to work with for now, just so I can make it reduce the amount of code I need to do until I get onto doing this properly. But yeah, so you can see it's got the relevant item data, weapon data, laser weapon data, and ranged weapon data, and these are all the values pulled out of the tables in here. Oh, so there's that. So that's one thing that I've been doing and got working. I then did a bit of work on just being able to move and shoot, and I really wanted to put emphasis on being able to do this in many different ways. So you can WASD, you can press and hold the left mouse button, and you can also click. And you always face where the cursor is at the moment, but eventually this will be like a mech, and the legs will walk towards the one direction, the body will rotate to face the other, but you get the idea. So you can spin around and wee. And shooting has similar kind of gimmick. So you can either press and hold it and you'll wild fire in a direction, or you can simply click on a target, and not only will you focus on them and keep pointing at them, but you'll keep shooting at them, and you can move freely. And again, you can move in any particular way that you like, maybe WSD or click to move. And then if you write I'll put in a bit more functionality, but that was something I just really wanted to make it do, because I like having the ability to control it in any way I like, because it's going to be kind of an action RPG sort of ability shooter. So you have a gun and maybe you press like Q and a laser comes out where you're pointing, but if you've got like a target selected and maybe you don't want to have to be accurate, then you can just select your target, press the button, and it does it on your selected target and all that kind of stuff. So that's the main thing I've got going there. And I built my own event system, which is going to be another significant aspect of the game. And I know I can use delegates, but for now I wanted to do my own concept of an event-driven system. And again, it's really straightforward. We have a base event which has the owner of the event, so the person that triggered it, and then the event type with some basic getters and setters. and currently we've just got health change and combat state as types of event. And so when you hit somebody with a projectile, basically this is just the base projectile stuff, nothing fancy going on here. All we do is we get the actor we've hit, convert them to our own class, run health change, and then we can do this. We can then trigger these health change events, and this is the pre-health change event, and then there's the post-health change event. And so this will be for things like, see here, we have our controller that is listening to, we have an event manager in the game instance, and we're listening to health change events and combat state events. And so we register to the event manager, so we get added. So our controller is implements the iEvent listener. And the iEvent listener, again, very straightforward. It literally has event triggered. And so when we go over to the I've scrolled past it. When we register, we just have a list, an array of event listeners. And then whenever an event is triggered, which in our case the character triggers it. So we've got, this is just a macro, a shorthand, but essentially we get the game instance, get the event manager, and then we pass in the event that we trigger. So you can see when we, why isn't it going back? Hang on, let me, good grief, hang on. For some reason I lost it completely there. So in here, yeah, we create, again, I've got another macro for it because it's really convenient, but all it's doing is getting the health change event, which is this, which takes in the owner, the health change, which is the struct, and whether it's a pre or post health change. And then so our health gets changed by this struct, which will be, you know, the health change struct is like the amount, whether it heals, the type of damage source. And so this then gets passed around the system, and the player controller is listening for those events. The event gets triggered. Is it a health change event? Then if it is, we cast it to that. If it's a pre-health change event, then we say our owner took this amount of damage, and then we get the health change event, get the change, and get the change amount, and then we output it in here. And currently that weapon does 30 damage, and this is where it all hangs together, and you can see that weapon does 30 damage because if you get a weapon data table, and we go into the controller down here, we're creating weapon 4, which in here is this projectile weapon, and the projectile weapon currently does 30 points of damage at 0.1 rate, so that's a lot of damage very quickly. So just for a very brief proof of concept, I'm going to change this to 300, save the file, close it down, go into here, hit play, get rid of our breakpoints. And now, I've got to scroll down. Now we're taking 300 damage. If I hit stop, go back into here, and we put it to some arbitrary number. Again, just to make it very obvious, and we simply hit play in here. Oh, I actually managed to right click. Oh, hang on, that won't work because I've got it open. That's something, well, I don't need to fix that actually, I'll get onto that in a second. Do that, and again, scroll all the way down, there you go, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 6, 2. Yeah, so that's the point of this. So without changing the game, without changing the code or a blueprint or something, I've just gone and changed the game, basically how that particular gun works. And if I wanted to add more guns, I just add more data to these tables, make sure the relationships are all correct, and that's that. It's just a new gun available. And then I go into the player controller, where I add the weapon, and for now this is where it's done. It won't be in the future, but I could change this to weapon 1, and now it will load weapon 1. And that's that. And it'll be the same for quests, hopefully abilities, general items in the game, armor, and probably quite a lot of other things if I can get it to work. And the only overhead is essentially making sure that I create a class that relates to every single table, and then data structs that relate to every single table, and then loading them at the start. But it's so quick, I don't think I could make enough data for it to load for it to have issues, because it's just reading strings from a text file essentially. And even if I had 1,000 different things in it and across like 20 different tables, it wouldn't even stop it at all, in theory. So yeah, that's the main where I'm up to with all of this. It just took me a very long time to get that far, but it's looking a lot better now. And I suppose just one last, oh my god, that was so loud, sorry. Just one last thing, I also made a Java application to actually generate all of that data. So this is my own overhead. So I've this is self-inflicted, but basically what it means is I can make all of the data in this Java application, hit run, and it will, just as again proof of concept, it would have overwritten this. So these are all like 30 again. So if we find the weapons in here, I could change this to like 60, this to 720, I guess. Hit run. Oh yeah, sorry. All of these things have to have it open. But if I hit run here and then go back into the weapon data, you can see it's changed these here. And that code's also available, and I'll put a link on the video for this so you can see all of the Java stuff for it. But again, it's just really generic CSV writer stuff. It's literally text manipulation. And again, there's just one class for every single table structure. And they know they'll create the other the data in the other tables for themselves, so they can reference the ID that then gets created. So when it creates item 0, it will, for instance in this case, it will be item 0 in here, which will be the item 0 there. It then creates the weapon data, but then obviously the ranged weapon data is then based on the weapon ID. So the weapon ID needs to be generated first, and blah blah blah. And in any case, it just makes it so I don't have to figure these out myself. And if I wanted to, I could even go even deeper into the Access database side of it and make it create new data report, UI and all that kind of stuff, but we don't need to. But for testing purposes and stuff, and generating the data, this is trivial. This is very easy to visualize and makes it very easy to work with. So that's the plan. There's just going to be, you know, maybe several hundred rows of data in this Java application that represents all of the quests and the items and stuff. But that doesn't, I don't think that's an issue. I think that's the minimum you have to do to make these things work consistently. So yeah, now basically be developing this by myself, again winging it. I haven't really used any guides or anything for this one. Again, I've looked a couple of things up here and there, but basically it was mostly just me making a new C project and trying things out. So yeah, I will hopefully continue this and do what I've done with the other ones, and you know, stream it and do like a couple hours every couple of days, to try and progress it further. It will mostly be like making the AI work, and then making the event system a bit more robust, and then making making like abilities and making the different weapons work and parkour effects and all the usual shenanigans. So I'll leave it there, but hopefully that gives people an overview of what I've been doing, and proves that I'm still actually doing stuff, even though it's been like a year since I last did anything noteworthy. So yeah, hopefully that might be useful for some people to know. I'll see you guys around.